Hey there, everybody. I have a really fun crew with me today. I have Steve, who has been helping me with some Star Trek stuff, and we have a special guest, Maggie from the Continuing Committee, also known as Jadzi Dex, which my Star Trek lack of knowledge is showing off as I just mispronounced that. But the Continuing Committee is sort of the equivalent of the PC in Star Wars CCG or the Players Council in Lord of the Rings, where they're continuing to keep the game going and putting out new virtual cards. And so we thought this would be a great chat with them to sort of hear about the work they're doing, their history, what's going on. They just dropped a new virtual set yesterday, so that's really exciting. But I'm actually going to let Steve lead most of this discussion because I'm kind of a noob in this. And I think it shows, but we're really excited to have Maggie here and sort of talk about the work that the CC is doing. And thank you for picking a different acronym than PC. There's two PCs, and it's very confusing. One's a Players Council, one's a Players Committee. I'm like, okay, which is which?
Well, the Continuing Committee is like it's a Star Trek lore reference. That's the Continuing Committee is the sort of like a Romulan intelligence bureaucracy body in Star Trek. It's a fitting name.
See, this is why Star Trek's so fun. Like it gets a little more into like the Romulan bureaucracy, right? Whereas Star Wars is just like everything works with a button.
That's why our site is green.
Yeah,
that's why our site is Romulan green.
Well, I guess it's sort of a starter question is, can you just kind of walk me through how did the CC get stood up and then kind of where you're at today, you know, how far you've come, sort of set that basic question for folks that maybe aren't so super familiar with you?
Yeah, sure. So when Decipher had the license to make games using Star Trek images and names and stuff, the IP from 1994 to 2007. So they lost the license at the end of 2007. And as soon as we got word that the license was lost, two of the best known players, Darren Lacoste, one of the Florida players, and Charlie Plain, who was in Ohio at the time, both approached Decipher separately and said, hey, we'd like to start a players committee like they have with Star Wars. And Decipher said, yeah, we think that's a good idea. Why don't you two talk to each other and start that up? So we didn't, so as I understand it, the Star Wars Players Committee was officially set up by Decipher and then run as an independent thing. And we basically just said, they told us, yeah, you guys have our blessing to use our IP on the gameplay mechanics, and good luck with that.
So a little background on the PC. So one of the reasons that Decipher was so generous with the PC with Star Wars was because it was 2001 and they still had a bunch of other product lines that they wanted the goodwill of the players, and they had a warehouse of stuff they couldn't legally sell anymore after January 1, 2001 or 2002 rather. So they said, well, this is a great way of keeping our people happy, because at the end of the day, these are pretty tight Venn diagrams of who plays Trek, who plays Star Wars, who plays Lord of the Rings, right? So it was a pretty easy thing for them to do logistically versus 2007, like this at the end.
Yeah. So in 2007, in December 2007, so we just did a 15th anniversary celebration set with on the second edition side. That Charlie and Darren put the CC together. And Brad DeFruiter, the main designer for second edition, came along, and he designed sets for us for several years after that until he moved on. Also, Mike Gerard, who was one of the other Decipher designers, continued to help us with building some virtual sets and working on some virtual sets. So we've been at that now for 15 years. We produce virtual sets for first edition, second edition, and the Tribbles CCG.
Cool. I'm going to head it off to Steve here. I'm going to bring up the website in the background. And I think we're getting a bit of an echo. Maybe Maggie, you can mute yours, but I'm going to bring up the website just so we can peruse it while Steve kind of asks you a few questions.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thanks, Maggie, for joining us. I've kind of been on the periphery of the Continuing Committee, sometimes a little bit more involved than other years. But one of the things always interested me is how it's unique that the Canadian Committee manages multiple games. You mentioned first edition, second edition, and the Tribble CCG. I hope we can get into a little bit of that later on as well. But can you talk a little bit about what some of the the challenges and opportunities for managing multiple games? Are there different design teams, different player groups, or is there some bit of crossover between the people at the CC managing the two games?
Yeah, so actually that gets a little bit into the structure of how we govern ourselves. So we are officially a not-for-profit organization registered in the state of Washington, because that's where our chief financial officer lives. And we incorporated, I want to say in 2017, so that we would have a separation, a corporate entity that we could use to run our PayPal site that was separate from any personal PayPal accounts. So when we did that, we formed a board of directors, and there are 7 directors. I'm one of them. I'm the executive officer. And we have directors for first edition and second edition. So they run the different games. And the director of first edition also runs the development for the Tribbles CCG. We also have directors for organized play. So we run a tournament system that's been going for 15 years now. So I have ratings back to 2008. And so you can set up tournaments for all 3 games. And let's see, who else do we have? We have a director of operations who runs all of the website stuff and lots of other things, and a director of communications who does our articles and social media and that sort of thing. So we've got these 7 people who run the continuing committee. And yeah, the two people in charge of developing new sets are the directors of first edition and second edition. And they work they each have their own staff, because there are people who only want to play first edition. There are people who only want to play second edition. There's people like me who play all the different games. And so there's staffing in each of those departments. And they work together to make sure that we're not releasing things at the same time, because there are some shared resources that mostly the programming stuff is a shared resource between the 2 games. So it's a lot of coordination.
Hey, Maggie, can I jump in with a quick question? Just for folks that might be
try to make sure that we are communicating as best we can with the public. We have board meetings approximately every 6 weeks or so where we publicly broadcast what we're working on. So yeah, it's it's quite compared to how it was at the very beginning, which was just like, hey, we're going to do some stuff. It's a lot more formal than it was back in the day.
Absolutely. I'm just going to jump in with a quick question.
Do you want me to tell you a little bit about how our sets generally get developed?
Yeah, that'd be great. I think one of the things I wanted to ask, though, if folks
I'm not hearing anything.
Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine, Matt. Can you hear me, Maggie?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead and speak now, because I think sometimes my speakers turn themselves off. So I'm hoping you'll go ahead and edit that out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I think yeah, maybe we had some technical difficulties there. I was just going to ask really quick here, if there's if people are just looking at this and they're just perusing the internet, they think that's really cool. How can I get involved or volunteer? Obviously, you have this executive board that's keeping this organized and kind of functioning from an executive level. But if you're just interested in maybe helping design a card, because I think for a lot of people, what they're finding is truly working on their favorite game and designing cards might be the dream job, right? That will never actually, all of us will never actualize. Like, I wanted to work at Decipher growing up. This was the coolest idea for me. And now the notion you get to design a card or help out or play test or something. So just before we get too into it, is there sort of an easy way that people can volunteer to play test or to sort of help out?
Oh, absolutely. So if you want to help us play test new sets, please contact you can either contact me directly, and I can direct you to the the directors for each of the games. But if you look at, yeah, you're on the volunteer page right now. Generally, we usually have, we almost always have a playtesters needed link up there for each of the 2 games. So I'll make sure that but if you want to help playtest first edition, or if you want to help playtest second edition, go ahead and contact those directors. So if you click on the About Us link at the top, you should see all the directors here. So yeah, so if you are a first edition player and you want to help playtest, actually the person to contact is, you'll see down on that, his name is James Monsabraten. He's our playtest manager for first edition. And so you should be able to PM.
Yep, I think so. And so, yeah, I think this is also the forums here. So there's a lot of resources. Check out the website. I'll leave a link to it in the video description. But I'm going to kind of hand it back to Steve. I just wanted to hop in there before we got too far into it, just in case people are just, hey, this sounds really cool. How can I get involved?
Yeah, so come to the forums, post up on the forums, ask questions. You can, there's so much cool stuff that you can do with, like, you can, one of the things you can do is that in our, regarding the forums, is that you can build the deck in the deck builder, and then there's a button that says, that'll allow you to discuss the deck in the forums, and it'll post a link, it'll create a new thread in the deck design forum for whatever game your deck is for. And then you can discuss. It'll make the deck public so people can look at it and discuss it. So, if you're doing something you think is pretty cool, you can post it up there that way. That cool. But yeah, there's lots of opportunity to talk. There's lots of people who still chat on the forums, even though I know forums are kind of de trop, as they say.
One question, Maggie, that I had is, I think I saw mention that the continuing committee will be returning to Gen Con this year. I know in the past, the CC has had a pretty active convention presence, which is a bit different than some of the other players' committees. Can you tell me a little bit about how that works out for the continuing committee, and what your plans are for conventions, and how that's part of your strategy for continuing to support and grow the player base?
Yeah, we have. So this year, I'm actually running the events at Gen Con this year. So we don't have like a formal process where we're like, we need to go to X big conventions, but I decided that I was able to go to Gen Con this year, and that I wanted to run some Trek events. So normally it's just we like to have a couple. We'll have a couple of big name tournaments. I'm running the U.S. National Championships this year at Gen Con. We also like to have a couple of sealed deck events that are a little more casual, because people love to come and play the sealed deck events, because it means they don't have to build a deck ahead of time, and they can just walk up and here's your cards, build your deck, and then play in a tournament. So those are always very popular for Gen Con. Typically in a year, anytime at Gen Con, we'll often run learn to play events like an hour before the tournaments start. So I'm debating whether I want to do that this year. I want to, but I also want to spend some time doing other things at the convention. And it does tend to suck up your whole day when you're running events at Gen Con, as I found in the past. So I probably will put in some learn to play events at the beginning, and I'll have decks printed out that can go out to people who there's some good beginner decks out there for first edition and second edition players. So I might put those out as well. And then we always have triples at 10. So each night we like to have a late night triples game, because triples games only last an hour. So we have
actually, that's a good segue. Could you tell us a little bit about the triples CCG? I know I've actually, I think I've played it once, but I know that it's one of your passions. It's sort of like a game within a game, kind of, because it was part of. Well, you should introduce it to the people who aren't familiar.
Okay, so when Decipher released the Trouble with Tribbles set for first edition, and I think that was in 2000. Mm-hmm. They made a side game that the Tribbles CCG, and it's basically, so they made this card type for first edition.
And Tribbles are the fuzzy little round ball pets that multiply like crazy from the original series.
Yeah. So Tribbles are, wait, Tribbles.
Yes,
Tribbles are the little fuzzy things from the original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, and they multiply. And Spock determines that they are born pregnant, so they have they basically fill up this space station in the Trouble with Tribbles episode. So the idea behind the Tribbles in first edition is you play them. They're a way to slow down your opponent. So you play them at different locations and they slow down your opponent. But they also made that card into its own mini game. And it's basically like playing Uno, but with a little extra depth. So in Uno, you play a progression of cards, or matching card. In this one, you play Tribbles as one Tribble, and then the next player in the circle has to play a 10 Tribble, and the next person has to play 100, and so on and so forth, up to 100,000. And then the Tribble powers can also do things. So there's things like, go. Well, you can, if you have the next card in the sequence in your hand, you can play, you basically play a double turn. Or rescue, you can bring a card back from your discard pile. So it's, so there's a little bit more to it, but it's basically, it's supposed to be a fun, fast game that you can play.
Decipher produced like a Tribbles box set concurrently with the Tribbles set, and then the Tribble cards and the expansion packs can be used with that game. But it's also pretty remarkable that the Continuing Committee has continued periodically, maybe once every year or so, to produce virtual sets for Tribbles, including like with some pretty creative CGI and stills from like the animated series and so forth. So it's it's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's so it originally started as kind of a joke. I think it actually started
like a Magic Unglued set almost, right?
Yeah, I think it started in 2009 as an April Fool's Day joke, and then where they produced a couple of new powers that would balance out some of the powers in the very first set. And then after that, it just sort of took off because people liked to play it. So I run a Tribbles game every Tuesday night online, and anybody can come and play.
So talking about online play a little bit for first edition, second edition, and of course the Tribbles game, it's played on Lackey, which is a sort of a platform that it's I think like tabletop simulator, but like 25 years old. So it's good because it's free, and it has plugins for all three of the Star Trek games, as well as like a bunch of other games too. And there's no rules enforcement, but it's pretty easy to like stand up games and manipulate the cards on the virtual tabletop.
Right. Yeah, Lackey is Lackey's how we do that, and big kudos to forum member Eberlems, who maintains the plugins for that. Eberlems is also our chief programmer, so he keeps the website running. And
Lackey plugins come out for the new sets like the same day, I think, that they're produced on the PC, on the CC website, right?
Yeah. So he actually, yes, he just updated the Lackey plugin for first edition yesterday, so people can be building their decks for the release event that's coming up in a couple weeks for Nemesis. So playing online is a really great way for folks who may not have a local play group anymore to get involved in the game. And there's a pretty big Discord community called the Dojo that's built to let people look for games. It's run by this guy TK who puts on online events pretty regularly, and it's a place where people the Dojo Discord is a place where people go to just get pick up games for whatever they want to play.
So talking about the virtual cards a little bit, Maggie, in terms of the virtual cards, one thing that's always interested me about them is that the Continuing Committee is able to use images and content from the sort of the legacy Star Trek shows, basically everything, from Star Trek original series through Enterprise in the first 10 movies, without going into anything from the J.J. Abrams films or the currently running Paramount Plus TV series. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys came to the conclusion that you would use image pulls from the material, as opposed to like what the Star Wars committee does, which is like action figure or cosplay photography?
Well, as I understand it, for the Star Wars Players Committee, and I don't have direct experience with them, but from what I understand it, they were specifically told they were not allowed to use new images. That they were restricted to the original images that were on the cards. And if they wanted to make new cards that didn't use those images, then they had to go and use that cosplay stuff. We were not told that we were not allowed to pick new images from those the, I guess, 6 shows, because we have Decipher never used anything from the animated series, but we figured that was old enough and not well known enough that CBS wasn't making any money off of the animated series, and we felt okay using those images. But we felt that we were well within fair use guidelines to continue to use to pick new images from the 5 series that Decipher had a license to, because they were, again, at this moment in time, CBS is not making a lot of money even off of Enterprise. And so we feel confident, as long as we can keep, as long as we can keep under CBS's radar, that we're okay to use those properties. We've decided not to use anything from the Kelvin timeline movies or the new Trek that's on Paramount Plus, simply because those are active. Those are active series. There's still talk about a 4th JJ Trek movie, and of course, Paramount's producing all sorts of new content with what are they up to now? 5 new shows?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So we don't want to, I totally want like new characters from Discovery and Strange New Worlds and Picard. I would love having new characters and new personas of old characters from those. But we think that because CBS is making money off of those shows right now, that if we tried to use images from them, that would trigger CBS saying, you guys need to stop.
Well, fortunately, like the legacy Star Trek content has got 600 plus hours of footage, so there's still new characters and events to mine from those, I think.
Yeah, there's whole episodes we've never made a card from, so it's out there. The content is out there for us.
A very different problem than what the Lord of the Rings guys have to deal with, I think, when they've used the same stuff so many different times.
Right. And that is the nice thing about having a TV show versus having a series of movies, that we have that luxury of content. That's also why we ask people, please don't sell your virtual cards. So we do make promo cards. In fact, that's going to be something I'm going to be doing. Today is assembling alternate image promo cards. So here, let's see how we can do that. So we make foil cards that we sell for as in part tournament kits. So we make foil cards we sell in tournament kits, and we ask people if they receive one of those prizes as part, in a tournament, or if you get it from one of our raffles, please don't sell your virtual cards, because if CBS sees somebody making money off of the virtual cards that we've produced, that's probably going to bring about a cease and desist letter.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the foil promos from the committee are really cool looking. I think they started doing them before the Star Wars guys did, and they're just like, they look really, really realistic. But another question, I don't know. I know you were involved with TUI from the beginning all the way up to the CC years. Can you say anything about how the decision came to revive 1E? Because really 1E had been more or less fallow in terms of new sets and content for somewhere around 5 years or so before the continuing committee decided to start making a virtual set. I was around a little bit during that time, so I can fill in some of my understanding, but I wonder if you have any insight into that.
I think that the very first virtual sets for first edition started coming out in late 2008, it looks like. And it looks to me like a lot of them, the very first things were centered around taking second edition backwards compatible cards and putting them on first edition templates is what it is because just to back up a second, in 2004 when 2002 when Decipher rebooted and came out with second edition, one of the things that they tried to do that was, as far as I can tell, universally hated by almost all first edition players was they would make cards in the second edition sets that they said were backwards compatible. So you could put them in first edition decks, but oftentimes they weren't well play tested for first edition.
Right.
So
they were either, in my view as a 1E player at the time, they were either unplayably bad or game breaking in terms of like their quality. Like usually the nouns were unplayable because 2E's baseline stats on like the strength, cunning, and integrity of characters or personnel are lower than 1E's like average. So just unplayable. And then a lot of the verb cards were game breakers. So they're a bit problematic and controversial.
Yeah, so a lot of those cards, they started to convert those backwards compatible cards to back to first edition templates, making them usable in first edition. And as I understand it, also trying to settle on trying to unbreak the game. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of cards that came out in Holodeck Adventures and the motion pictures were, and All Good Things were horribly broken, not well play tested at all at the end of the first edition run. So there were a lot of problems with the game from around 2001 to the beginning of the continuing committee era. And so starting in 2008, the first edition players were really working hard to try to balance the game through, trying to, as I understand it, and again, I didn't pick up first edition back until like 2017. Once the official tournament format had been, around for a few years and had sort of settled in. But
the official tournament format, for those of you who don't follow it as much, is a
player tournament styles, X list, and revised that were sort of amalgamations of house rules from some of the player groups around the world who were trying to come up with a way to unbreak the game through either errata or bans or rules changes.
Yeah, one thing I would say, since I was a bit involved with 1E as it was revived, is I think the continuing committee was very smart in that it took some very hard stances on things as a way of, like you say, unbreaking 1E. And you alluded to some of those. One of them was that, yes, there will be a ban list for tournament play. Decipher was like allergic to ban lists for all their games. Maybe they did for Lord of the Rings a little bit, but Star Wars Star Trek definitely not. So yes, we're gonna have a ban list. We're gonna kick out these cards that have been plaguing the game for almost 2 decades. And then second, what you mentioned about the second edition backwards compatible cards, that this is a problem. So we're going to make a concerted effort to convert them all to 1E and then ban the 2e version. That was really crucial. Like, we'll make the card actually usable in first edition, put in the template, tweak the stats, and then you can't use the 2e one anymore. And then lastly, just taking a strong stance with what needs to be fixed in the game and getting those early sets right, so that you're basically putting out the barn fire of some of those abusive strategies before deciding to then go on and make like. So what they did is they made several sets to sort of fix the game, and then let's go on to the future, which would be like new blocks and new like strategy focused sets. I think that was a good decision. Maybe that's why I think that's one of the reasons why the game was able to sort of continue to proceed in parallel with second edition, is that these fixes were put in play decisively in the beginning.
I'm looking at this, going at, really looking for, just thinking about this, looking at the different sets that come out. That's pretty much what I'm seeing here. And the first real card set with new cards in it, and also lots of backwards compatible conversions, looks to be Life from Lifelessness in 2010. So
and then after that, they sort of went back in Next Generation and did a three-part Next Generation block, a DS9 block, and so forth, once the game was a little more settled.
So I just keep getting a little feedback. I'm going to just maybe mute Maggie here for a sec. I think it's the feedback on that end. So I'm curious if you could kind of talk a little bit about the modern sort of tournament play. So are you guys having bigger events in person, or sort of, I just know that's something with a lot of these organizing bodies, that they're trying to move towards having events again in person. The Star Wars folks are having, worlds and nationals and all these sort of things. Are you guys having a sort of similar cadence of events in person? Or I'd also be curious to hear about where a lot of the player base is. Is it still very US centric, or is, Star Trek maybe more global IP?
So as I mentioned before, we do have an organized play director, and we are returning very slowly to having more and more player groups come back online, come play face to face. We run everything from local events. That's monthly tournaments that people can have. We have big player bases in Florida. We've got a pretty active group in Alabama. I'm just thinking about the East Coast. There's a tournament coming up next weekend, actually in the DC area. So called Monasters. And let's see. So we've got active groups. I've got an active group here in Chicago. There's lots of folks in Minnesota who play, the Seattle area, Southern California, Northern California. So pretty active player bases around the US. Then we have player bases in Munich, Vienna, London. There's a 1E player group that plays up in the Leeds area, so more the Yorkshire in the UK. So we do have, and from time to time we still have people who play in Australia. So we do have, we do have player groups all over the world. Well, thank you for the region headquarters there. So you can, this part of the website, you can find out what your region is, and you can put yourself, if you're registered with the site, you can say which region you are in, and people can find you that way. So I'm in region Deep Space Nine, is our region, fittingly.
I gotta say, I think my favorite region here might be the Alaska, Northern Canada. I bet this is hard to get people together.
Yeah, I've been, let's see, region 8, that's Ruapente. I keep telling there's this guy, Alan Gould on the 1E side who lives up in Alberta. He lives in Edmonton. And he still has, he's got a regular player group. They're 100% casual, but I'm like, Alan, you need to hold a tournament so I can come to Edmonton and I can play I can add region Ruapente to my, to the regions I've played in. I'm like, I would totally do that if you had a tournament up there, Alan.
And these region names
So,
are
yeah.
also super fun because they're all thematic based upon the climates in the area. So like Breen for the far north is a supposed to be totally frozen planet, as well as like Fringanar for the Pacific Northwest is it's a rainy planet. So yeah, that's all little inside jokes for all those names.
This is really nice the way this is. You kind of get the different players or add yourself. So this is like a good player locator as well. So you're sitting here like, oh, I have this stuff and I'm in Montana, region 8. There might be some people around you. Looks like maybe not in Montana unless I misclicked something here. I'm sorry, Montana's in region 18. My geography is off. But this might be a way of kind of, I'm sorry, forget my geography. It's 7 here. But I think this is a really nice tool, and I think it kind of encouraged people to use this to find other players that are going to be in their region that we can, connect there. Steve, did you have any other questions? I think I've kind of wrapped up. It is not an easy task to keep something like this running and going 15 years later. And I'm kind of just amazed at how you guys have such a sophisticated organization as far as having sort of an org chart and, teams of people doing stuff. I think that this is the sort of ongoing engagement that all out of print games need if they want to survive into the next phase. Because with no new print runs coming out, there's no new engagement. It's really easy for things just to kind of fall by the wayside and just become another binder that sits underneath the bed, right? Which is not something we want for this stuff. So I guess those are sort of my closing thoughts. Steve, did you have any other kind of few items there? I think you're on mute here.
Yeah, I would just say that that covers everything I wanted to ask. But I would just say that if you have that binder under your bed and you're watching the show, check out the new virtual sets. Like we said, the Star Trek Nemesis set just dropped, and I think if you take a look at the virtual, you'd be surprised to see how much continuity there is with the stuff you played back in the 90s, as well as how much innovation these new sets have. So definitely give them a look.
So the new set's called Nemesis, is that right? I'm just want to make sure I'm clicking on the right thing.
Yeah, Nemesis. It's based primarily on Star Trek Nemesis from 2002, with a little stuff from some of the other Next Generation era films like First Contact, or Generations First Contact and Insurrection.
So this is the new set here. I think I've got this pulled up.
Yeah.
This is the new set. So you can kind of see. It's just
even
so
got
nice
some
to use
stuff from the deleted scenes from Nemesis, which is really cool. I always love to see new sort of canon stuff. So there's a new persona of Wesley Crusher from Nemesis, that from a little known deleted scene. So there's some really cool stuff in the set.
I'll just say it's so nice to use these movie stills. Bless the PC's heart for using sort of their own art, but it's just this feels like the good stuff again, right? The sort of retro, the stuff that made me fall in love with these games back in the day. So it's just really cool. I encourage people just to peruse the website. Like I said, I'll leave a link to it. Maggie, do you have any kind of final thoughts? Thanks so much for taking out some time on a Saturday morning to just chat with me and Steve.
It's all good. It's been an absolute pleasure. So yeah, I mean, if you are interested in pulling your cards out of the binder, just come check us out. If you Matt, if you would go back to the main page for just a moment.
Yep.
We've got, if you look under the big picture in the center, you see new or returning to the game, beam in here. So it's a link with a green background. Yes. So that is our FAQ. That's got stuff. There's some resources in there for new players. It's got a little history of the game, some resources for players, answers to things like the question of why do we only use the 5 shows Decipher did, that sort of thing. Also, how do I find new people, that sort of thing. So we would love to see, we have been, since the pandemic, people were going through and finding their cards, we've had quite a few players come back, and we've been so delighted to meet these former players who've come and joined our community. It's just been absolutely fantastic for us, which, it's been something we've loved. And, we have some resources for new people to help you catch up. There's some There's some decks for first edition that are specifically geared towards new people and teaching them how to play the game. We've also got some great decks for second edition players. You can learn the game that way. For organized play, come out and see if there's a local play group near you, or contact your local ambassador, because we do have people who are point persons for the different regions. And but yeah, I mean, we're so delighted that we get to continue to run this game. We're hosting, besides the national championships at Gen Con this year, the North American Continental Championships are in Seattle. I don't know if we have a location yet for the European Continental Championships. I think first edition will be in Munich, but I haven't heard about second edition yet. But the World Championships are scheduled this year to be in Leeds in the UK at the end of September. So we have and yes, so we do hold our World Championships. We move them all over the world. We generally switch between North America and Europe every other year.
Well, this has been a really fun conversation, and there's a load of resources out there. This is one of the things that I think is a really big barrier to entry for folks, is the lack of resources. And so these organic player groups and organizing committees really help put together the resources to help people find the information out, because this is the fact, like the internet is hard to navigate 20 years ago, right? This is one of the things I discovered when I kind of got back into collecting and finding this stuff, is there's just no information about a lot of these games. And it's really refreshing to find organizations that care and have been, thinking about this for 15 plus years and sort of codifying a lot of this information. So really appreciate the work you guys are doing. New folks, feel free to reach out. Are you guys on Discord, or is there really or is it really the forums of the primary sort of place to hang out?
There are two Discord channels dedicated to the Star Trek CCG. The one I mentioned before is called the Dojo, and that one is geared a lot towards organized play. And then the continuing committee has its own Discord channel that is not quite as active, but it's there. And so there's two places that you can go to. There's two places you can go to chat about Star Trek CCG on Discord.
Cool.
We also have a Twitter account, and we have our own Facebook page, and both of those are managed by our social media manager.
That's really awesome. Maggie, I think we'll call it a wrap there. Folks, if you have questions, leave them in the comments. We'll try to get to stuff. Like, subscribe, check out their website, all that sort of good stuff. Follow them on social media. With all these games, it's truly, these communities are small, and every person does matter. That's one thing I love about out of print games and dead CCGs is, hey, there's only a couple hundred of us. Be nice to each other. So maybe we'll call it there, and we'll see everybody next time.